My name is Wren Castellanos, and I'm 28 now, though this story really started boiling over about 10 years ago, simmered for a long, hard decade, and then it came to a full, rolling boil right in my family's kitchen. There was a time when the only thing my family, the Castellanos of Castellanos Corner, thought I could cook was trouble, or, at best, some overly ambitious, fancy nonsense nobody in our small town would ever want. Now, I own a significant slice of the culinary landscape in this very city, and they were about to find that out the hard way, right when their world, the world they'd built on meatloaf and mashed potatoes, was about to crumble like a day-old biscuit. Have you ever poured your heart and soul into something, every fiber of your being, only for the people who are supposed to be your biggest cheerleaders to just scoff? To tell you it's not good enough, not real enough, not them enough? It's a particular kind of sting, isn't it? Let me know in the comments below where you're tuning in from. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. And hey, if you've ever felt like the underdog, especially in your own family, or if you've had to dig deep and fight twice as hard to prove your worth against a chorus of doubts, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps more than you know, and if you're new here, consider subscribing. I share stories about turning the tables, about finding your own recipe for success, especially when the ingredients you're given are less than ideal. Our family diner, Castellanos Corner, wasn't just a business, it was a landmark in Oakhaven, or at least, that's how my parents, Maria and Ricardo Castellanos, saw it. It had been there for 30 years, a testament to their hard work, a monument built of Formica countertops, red vinyl booths, and the persistent, comforting aroma of frying bacon, brewing coffee, and the day's special, which was usually something involving gravy. My earliest memories are steeped in that smell, in the clatter of plates, the murmur of regulars, the hiss of the griddle. It was a place of comforting predictability, a culinary time capsule. And then there was me. From the moment I could reach the countertop, I wasn't interested in just flipping pancakes or slapping together a BLT, though I learned to do both with dutiful precision. My curiosity tugged me towards the why of cooking, the alchemy of it. While my older brother, Leo, 3 years my senior and the anointed heir to the greasy throne, was content to master the existing menu, I was sneaking peeks at my abuela Elena's old, spice-stained cookbooks, the ones filled with recipes from a homeland my parents rarely spoke of with such culinary detail. I'd experiment in our home kitchen, much to my mother's mild exasperation, trying to coax new flavors from everyday ingredients, adding a pinch of smoked paprika here, a sprig of fresh rosemary there. Wren, ¿qué estás haciendo? What is this? A science project? My mother, Maria, would ask, peering into a bubbling concoction that bore little resemblance to her standard repertoire. She wasn't unkind, not really, but there was a bewildered distance in her eyes when she looked at my culinary adventures. My father, Ricardo, a man whose hands were perpetually stained with either grease or coffee, was more blunt. That's interesting, Mija. But people come to the corner for a good, honest burger, not whatever that fragrant stuff is. Stick to peeling potatoes, eh? That's useful. Leo, bless his simple, diner-centric heart, was the worst. He'd saunter into the home kitchen, a dish towel slung over his shoulder like a mark of his unearned authority, and peer at my efforts with a smirk. Playing chef again, Wren? Don't burn the house down with your fancy experiments. He was good at the diner tasks, efficient, uncomplaining, and he soaked up our parents' praise like a sponge. He had no real vision for the place beyond keeping it exactly as it always had been, which, in their eyes, was a virtue. My early attempts to suggest even minor improvements at the diner were met with a united front of dismissal. A fresher herb in the meatloaf, Papa? Maybe a homemade aioli for the fries instead of the bottled stuff? I'd venture, hopeful. What? Wren, it's mayonnaise. It comes in a jar. It's fine. Papa would say, waving a dismissive hand. This is a diner, not one of your little dream restaurants in Paris, France. Mama would just sigh, a soft, weary sound. Mija, your brother knows what our customers like. He has a feel for it. And Leo? Leo would just grin, that infuriatingly smug grin. Yeah, Wren, stick to what you know, which is apparently not what sells. The emotional impact of this constant invalidation was like a slow marination in disappointment. My passion, the very thing that made me feel alive and uniquely myself, was treated as a frivolous hobby, a childish whim I was expected to outgrow. I felt like a rogue ingredient in the family recipe, one they kept trying to scrape off the spoon. The message was clear: my dreams were inconvenient, my talents irrelevant to the Castellanos legacy. I was the garnish, easily discarded. The simmering resentment, the quiet ache of being misunderstood, finally reached a boil the year I graduated from culinary school. I'd clawed my way through it, armed with a patchwork of scholarships I'd fought for tooth and nail, and fueled by countless hours working thankless jobs, prepping vegetables in steamy back kitchens, washing mountains of dishes until my hands were raw. My parents hadn't financially supported my fancy schooling, as they called it. "There's a perfectly good school of hard knocks right here at the corner, Wren," my father had said, not unkindly but firmly. "Leo learned everything he needs to know right here." So, when I returned to Oakhaven, diploma in hand, skills honed, and a portfolio of recipes I was genuinely proud of, I carried a fragile hope. Maybe now, with a formal qualification, they'd see. Maybe now, they'd let me contribute in a meaningful way. The diner, even then, was starting to show the first subtle signs of wear and tear, not just physically, but in its customer base. The regulars were aging, and newer, fresher spots were starting to pop up in the outskirts of town, drawing a younger crowd. One afternoon, armed with a carefully crafted dish, a slow-braised short rib infused with a hint of star anise and orange zest, served over creamy polenta, a refined take on comfort food, I presented it to my family. "I thought maybe we could try this as a special," I said, my voice betraying a tremor of nerves. "It's hearty, it's delicious, and it might bring in some new people, show them we can do more than just the basics." My father poked at the glistening meat with his fork. He took a bite, chewed thoughtfully, then sighed. "Wren," he began, and my heart sank. I knew that tone. "We've been doing this for nearly 30 years. It's very well cooked, but it's not us. People come to Castellanos Corner for a simple burger, a stack of pancakes, not this. This is too much." My mother, bless her, tried to soften the blow. "Ay, mija, it's lovely, truly, but your father is right, it's just not what our customers expect. Leo knows what they want. He's going to do his chili next week, the one that won the Elks Lodge cook-off 3 years ago." She smiled, as if this settled the matter. Leo, who had been watching with an unreadable expression, finally chimed in, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "It's good, Wren, for, like, a fancy restaurant in the city. But around here? They'd choke on the price we'd have to charge for ingredients like that." He smirked. "Stick to the potatoes, sis, you're good at those." The rejection was a physical blow. It wasn't just about the short ribs or the polenta, it was about me. My training, my passion, my desperate desire to be seen, to be valued by them, all dismissed with a polite, "It's not us." That evening, Oakhaven was hosting its annual fall fair, a small local food festival. I'd hoped, secretly, that my dish might be our entry. Instead, my father proudly announced they'd be serving Leo's chili, in a styrofoam cup, with a plastic spoon. It was safe, it was predictable, it was Leo. They didn't win anything, of course, they never did. I retreated to my childhood bedroom, the scent of my rejected short ribs clinging to my clothes like a shroud. The hurt was a deep, throbbing ache in my chest. Was I so fundamentally wrong about my own abilities? Was my palate, my intuition, so misaligned with reality? Why couldn't they see the potential, the opportunity? Why did they cling so fiercely to a past that was visibly, if slowly, dimming? My internal monologue was a torrent of confusion and despair. "Maybe they're right," a small, insidious voice whispered. "Maybe you are just playing. Maybe this passion is just arrogance." I cried that night, silent, hot tears of frustration and a burgeoning, terrifying sense of hopelessness. Staying felt like consigning myself to a life of peeling potatoes and watching my spirit wither. Leaving felt like an act of betrayal, yet also, increasingly, like the only path to survival. The next morning, I tried to talk to them, to explain how much it meant to me, how their dismissal felt like a door slamming shut in my face. My father, stirring sugar into his coffee with a clink that seemed deafeningly final, looked at me with a sort of weary patience. "Wren, it's not personal, it truly isn't. It's just business." This is how we've always done things at the corner. It's what works for us. But Papa, I pleaded, what if it's not working as well as it used to? What if we need to try something new to keep up? He sighed, the sound heavy with the weight of years. This diner is Leo's future, his inheritance. He understands it. He'll keep it going. My mother, her hands twisting in her apron, added softly, "You're too sensitive, Mija. We love you, you know that. But your food, it's for a different kind of place. A big city place, perhaps, not for Oakhaven." Her words, meant to be comforting, were ironically prophetic, and, at the time, felt like another gentle push out the door. Leo, lounging at the counter with the morning paper, didn't even look up. "Yeah, Wren, go try and sell that fancy stuff to the tourists down in the city. Our regulars? They'd just laugh you out of town." His casual cruelty, the utter lack of empathy, was the final straw. It wasn't just that they didn't believe in my food, they didn't seem to believe in me, not the real me, the one who dreamed in flavors and textures. That afternoon, I packed my knives, a few clothes, and the meager savings I'd scraped together. The decision, when it finally solidified, felt less like a choice and more like an imperative, a biological need to escape an environment where I couldn't breathe. As I stood on the porch of our small house, my worn suitcase beside me, I made a silent vow. It wasn't a vow of revenge, not exactly. It was a vow of becoming. "I'll show them." I whispered to the quiet Oakhaven street. "No, I'll show myself. I'll build something so undeniably real, so incredibly successful, that fancy will be an accolade, not a dismissal. I will become someone they can't ignore, someone whose worth isn't measured in peeled potatoes." The years that followed were a relentless grind, a culinary crucible. I landed in a bustling, indifferent city hundreds of miles from Oakhaven, a tiny fish in an ocean of talent and ambition. The first few months were a blur of cramped shared apartments, the constant scent of other people's cooking, rarely good, and the gnawing loneliness of pursuing a dream with no familiar faces to share the burden. I worked punishing hours in a series of progressively more demanding kitchens. I was a prep cook, a line cook, a sous chef, often the only woman in a brigade of swaggering, testosterone-fueled men who seemed to view my presence as either an anomaly or an opportunity for condescension. "Hey, sweetheart, you sure you can lift that stock pot?" One particularly odious chef had sneered. I'd lifted it, my arms screaming, my face a mask of neutrality, and then proceeded to out-prep and out-cook him on more than one occasion. There were days I lived on instant noodles and stale bread, my stomach growling as I plated exquisite dishes for wealthy patrons I'd never meet. I saved every spare penny, scrimping on everything, clothes, entertainment, sometimes even decent food for myself. The irony wasn't lost on me. I pored over business plans by the dim light of a cheap desk lamp, took out terrifyingly large loans with shaking hands, the fear of failure a constant, bitter taste in my mouth. There was a failed pop-up venture that cost me nearly everything I'd saved, a brutal lesson in the fickleness of trends and the importance of a solid financial footing. Each setback felt like confirmation of my family's doubts, a whisper of, "We told you so," carried on the city wind. The emotional toll was immense. I missed the simple, uncritical affection of my abuela Elena, the only one who had ever seemed to glimpse the fire in my belly. But amidst the struggle, glimmers of light appeared. I found a mentor in Chef Antoine Dubois, a notoriously difficult but brilliant old-school French chef. He was a culinary tyrant, his kitchen run with military precision, but he possessed an uncanny ability to spot raw talent. He saw past my exhaustion and my sometimes shaky confidence. One evening, after a particularly grueling service, he tasted a sauce I'd been experimenting with on the side. He was silent for a long moment, his hawk-like eyes fixed on me. Then, a rare, almost imperceptible nod. "Castellanos," he rumbled, his voice like gravel. "Your palate, it is a gift, an instinct. Do not let anyone, not even yourself, dull its edge." His gruff validation was worth more than 1,000 empty compliments. He pushed me harder than anyone ever had, and under his demanding tutelage, my skills sharpened, my creativity flourished. Then came Chloe. I met her at a dismal industry networking event, both of us hiding in a corner, nursing lukewarm white wine. She was an MBA graduate with a sharp mind for numbers and a passion for food, but zero desire to be in a hot kitchen. She was looking for a chef with vision. I was a chef drowning in vision but desperate for business acumen. We clicked instantly. She became my rock, my business partner, the pragmatic counterbalance to my artistic temperament. "Wren, this dish is poetry," she'd say. "But can we source these ingredients consistently and price it profitably?" Together, we were a formidable team. And there was Abuela Elena. Though miles away, her support was a constant, warm current. She'd learned, with the help of a tech-savvy grandniece, how to navigate the internet. She'd find articles about new restaurant openings in my city, her calls filled with excited questions and unwavering belief. "Mija," she'd say, her voice crackling over the phone line. "I read about a chef doing wonderful things with fusion. Are you near there? You must show them what a Castellanos can truly do." She'd send small, precious checks tucked into cards adorned with glittery saints. For good ingredients, mi amor, money I knew she could ill afford to spare. Her faith was a lifeline. Meanwhile, my occasional calls home were a study in contrasts. My parents would recount Leo's minor, mundane achievements at the diner with disproportionate pride. "Leo fixed the leaky faucet in the men's room all by himself. Saved us a plumber's bill, that boy." Or, "Leo's decided we should stick to the classic coffee blend. No need for those fancy flavored beans." There was never any real curiosity about my life, my struggles, my tiny, hard-won victories. The diner, they'd say, was a bit slow, but "it's always like that this time of year," or "people are just not eating out as much." They never admitted the depth of the decline, the fraying edges of their comfortable world. I heard through Abuela that Leo had gotten a shiny new pickup truck, that his room had been renovated. And I, wiping sweat from my brow after a 16-hour shift, would eat my bowl of ramen and channel the frustration, the stinging unfairness, into an even fiercer determination. Their indifference became my fuel. The first milestone felt like cresting a colossal mountain after years of relentless climbing. With a loan secured by Chloe's unwavering belief and a business plan we'd refined countless times, we opened the Sparrow's Nest. It was a tiny, 20-seat bistro tucked away on a side street. Every penny scraped together, every piece of mismatched furniture sourced from thrift stores or sheer luck. The name was a quiet nod to my own, a symbol of a fragile thing taking flight. The first few months were terrifying. Some nights, we'd have more staff than customers. I cooked my heart out, pouring every ounce of my skill, my passion, my story onto each plate. Then, a well-known local food blogger came in, unannounced. A week later, a glowing review appeared, praising the innovative yet soulful cooking and the hidden gem we'd created. Suddenly, the phone started ringing, reservations piled up. People were talking about the Sparrow's Nest. It was surreal. That first taste of recognition, of people choosing my food, loving my food, was intoxicating. Buoyed by this success, we expanded, carefully, strategically. Chloe was a wizard with spreadsheets and projections. Our second venture, Wren's Table, was a slightly more upscale establishment focusing on seasonal, locally sourced ingredients. It garnered even more critical acclaim. Then came the Gilded Spoon, a playful, inventive dessert bar that became an Instagram sensation. Each restaurant had its own distinct personality, a different facet of my culinary identity, but all were built on the same foundation: quality, passion, and an unwavering commitment to excellence. I started winning awards: Rising Star Chef, Best New Restaurant. My name, Wren Castellanos, began to circulate in the wider culinary world. A name synonymous with innovation and success. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was building an empire, brick by painstaking brick. My company, Sparrow Holdings, grew from a dream into a tangible, thriving entity. I tried, sporadically, to share these milestones with my family. A brief, hopeful call after the Sparrow's Nest took off. "Mom, Dad, guess what? We got a 3-star review in the city paper. They called my food revelatory." The response from the other end was muted. "Oh, that's nice, dear," Mom said, her voice distant. "Listen, your abuela isn't feeling too well. I have to run. But good for you. Leo, by the way, finally got the old ice machine working again. Such a clever boy." Or my father, after Wren's Table was featured in a regional magazine, "Is that like Yelp, that magazine thing? Your abuela got a very good review on her flan at the church bake sale last week." She was thrilled. They never asked for details, they never suggested visiting. My achievements seemed to exist in a parallel universe, one they had no desire to enter. It was as if my success was written in a foreign language they refused to learn, perhaps because acknowledging it would mean acknowledging their own misjudgment, their own dismissal of me. Leo, when I once cornered him on a rare visit home for Christmas, a brief, awkward affair, just smirked. Still playing with that fancy food, huh, Wren? Hope you're not actually starving up there in the big city. Remember, there's always a place for you here, washing dishes. The barb, meant to wound, barely registered. I was too busy building something real. Abuela Elena, however, was my secret, fervent cheerleader. My cousin Sophia, who lived closer to my city, had once stumbled into the Gilded Spoon, recognized my name on the menu and promptly called Abuela, raving about the experience. Abuela, with Sophia's patient tutelage, became surprisingly adept at navigating online food blogs and restaurant review sites. She'd call me, her voice trembling with pride. Mi querida Wren, I saw pictures of your Wren's table. Ay, Dios mío, the plating is like art. Your grandfather, he would have puffed up his chest like a proud rooster, telling everyone in Oakhaven about his brilliant granddaughter. Her unwavering belief was a balm to old wounds, a quiet affirmation that I wasn't crazy, that my path had merit. Sophia, too, after her accidental discovery, became a tentative bridge, occasionally mentioning my successes to my parents, who would usually change the subject, uncomfortable with this narrative that didn't fit their established script. As my professional life soared, the news from Oakhaven grew increasingly grim. Castellanos Corner was undeniably, visibly failing. Abuela's calls started to carry a worried undertone. Your mama sounds so tired, Wren, and your papa, he tries to be strong, but I hear the fear in his voice. Suppliers were reportedly going unpaid. The cheery red paint on the diner's facade was peeling badly. The iconic neon sign, Castellanos Corner, home of good eats, had developed a persistent flicker in the good eats part, a rather unfortunate metaphor. My parents' calls, once infrequent, became even rarer, and when they did call, their voices were strained, their usual platitudes about the diner's resilience wearing thin. They never directly asked for help, never admitted the true extent of the disaster. Their pride, or perhaps their shame, was a fortress. Then, Abuela called, her voice hushed with dread. Wren, mi amor, I heard from Consuelo next door to the diner, the bank. They are talking about foreclosure. Your parents, they are going to lose everything. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Foreclosure. The end of Castellanos Corner. The end of my parents' life's work. Despite everything, despite the years of dismissal and hurt, the thought of them losing it all, of that faded, flawed but historically significant piece of our family vanishing, struck a surprisingly painful chord. And in that moment, a plan began to form, a plan that had been subtly, almost subconsciously, taking shape for years. Sparrow Holdings hadn't just been investing in my new city. Quietly, through a series of carefully managed LLCs, I'd begun acquiring commercial properties back in Oakhaven, not out of nostalgia initially, but as sound investments. The town was slowly, tentatively, trying to revitalize its downtown core, and I saw potential where others saw decay. I owned the Cornerstone Grill, a gastropub that had opened to rave reviews the previous year, always packed. Saffron Shores, an elegant seafood place by the newly dredged lake, was another of mine. And The Daily Grind, a small chain of boutique coffee shops that had become the town's new favorite caffeine fix, those were mine too. I hadn't advertised my involvement. Oakhaven knew Sparrow Holdings as an out-of-town investment firm. They didn't know Wren Castellanos, the girl who used to peel potatoes at the corner, was the Sparrow. It was time to go home. It was time for the final course. My return to Oakhaven was unannounced. I drove myself, my sleek, understated sedan, a stark contrast to the dusty pickup trucks that still dominated the town's streets. Castellanos Corner looked even more desolate than I'd imagined. The paint was more faded, the windows grimmier. The Good Eats on the sign was now completely dark. Only a few sad-looking cars were parked out front during what should have been the lunch rush. My heart gave a strange, complicated pang. I found my parents and Leo huddled around one of the worn Formica tables in the dim interior of the diner. A stark white envelope, official-looking and ominous, lay between them, the foreclosure notice. The air was thick with despair, a miasma of failure and fear. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed. My father looked smaller, older, his usual bluster completely gone. Leo just stared at the envelope, his face a mask of sullen resentment. "We don't know what to do, Wren," my father said, his voice raspy, barely looking up as I pulled up a chair. His use of my name felt heavy, freighted with unspoken things. "We're going to lose it all. 30 years, gone." My mother finally met my gaze, her eyes pleading. If only we'd saved more. But everything, every penny, always went back into this place. There was a subtle implication in her tone. A familiar echo of the narrative where I was the one who had flown the coop, selfishly pursuing my own dreams while they toiled. She conveniently forgot or chose to ignore that my fancy schooling and early ventures had been funded by my own sweat and sacrifice without a dime of their support. Leo, ever predictable, finally spoke, his voice laced with bitterness. "Yeah, well, maybe if some people hadn't abandoned the family business for fancy pipe dreams in the city, we wouldn't be in this mess." His glare was aimed squarely at me. The audacity of it, after all these years, was almost breathtaking. I let the silence hang for a moment, absorbing their fear, their blame, their utter helplessness. Then, I spoke, my voice calm, even. "I might have a solution." 3 pairs of eyes snapped towards me, startled. "I can buy the building," I continued, keeping my tone neutral. "I can pay off the bank, settle the debts." My father stared, his jaw slack. "You? Wren, this is serious money. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. The bank, the suppliers?" My mother blinked, a flicker of bewildered hope in her eyes. "Mija, that's a very sweet thought, but where would a young woman like you get that kind of money? Did your little restaurant do well?" Leo actually snorted, a harsh, dismissive sound. "Her little play, restaurant? Give me a break, Wren. This is the real world. This isn't about making a few pretty plates. This is about saving our necks." I met his gaze, my own unwavering. "My little play, restaurants as you call them, Leo, have done quite well actually. In fact, my company, Sparrow Holdings, has been actively investing in commercial real estate for several years now." I paused, letting that sink in. "Remember the Cornerstone Grill that opened downtown last year? The one that's always packed, lines out the door on weekends?" My father nodded slowly, a confused frown on his face. "Yes, a very successful place. They say the food is excellent. What about it?" "That's one of mine," I said quietly. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Leo's smirk faltered. I continued, my voice steady. "Saffron Shores by the lake, the one that got that big write-up in the regional travel magazine? Also mine. And the Daily Grind, that new coffee shop chain with 3 locations now, the one everyone in town seems to be raving about?" I leaned forward slightly. "Those are mine too. In fact, Sparrow Holdings owns, give or take, about half of the successful new food establishments that have opened in Oakhaven and the surrounding county in the last 5 years." Dead. Utter. Silence. The only sound in the diner was the ancient hum of the empty pie cooler. My father's face had gone pale, a mottled, unhealthy color. My mother just stared, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. Leo looked like he'd been poleaxed. His mouth hung slightly open, the arrogance completely wiped from his face, replaced by a raw, stunned disbelief. A flicker of something else crossed his features. Was it jealousy? Humiliation? Or maybe, just maybe, a sliver of grudging awe. "So yes," I concluded, my voice gentle but firm, "I can afford to buy this building. I can clear the debt. The question isn't whether I can. The question is, under what terms?" The power dynamic in that dingy, failing diner hadn't just shifted, it had undergone a seismic, irreversible upheaval. They were no longer the arbiters of my worth, the dismissive critics of my fancy dreams. I was Wren Castellanos, owner of Sparrow Holdings, and I held all the cards. Their future, the future of Castellanos Corner, now rested entirely in my hands. The irony was so thick, you could have spread it on toast. My father was the first to speak, his voice a hoarse whisper. You did all that, Wren. All those places, they're yours? Without telling us?" There was a hint of accusation in his tone, but it was buried deep beneath layers of shock and a dawning, uncomfortable respect. "I told you about my successes, Papa," I reminded him gently. "The sparrow's nest, Wren's table, you just weren't very interested in the details of my fancy city life." My mother just shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "All this time, we had no idea, Mija, no idea what you were building." Regret was a palpable presence in the air, thick and heavy. Leo remained silent, his face a turbulent landscape of emotions. He looked smaller, diminished. His entire identity, built on being the heir apparent, the one who understood real food and real business, had just been publicly, unequivocally dismantled by the sister he'd always mocked. I laid out my offer calmly, professionally. I would purchase the building outright through Sparrow Holdings, the debt to the bank would be cleared immediately, the outstanding supplier bills would be settled. Castellanos Corner could continue to operate, but it would be under new management, my management, or an experienced manager appointed by me. I even offered them roles, if they wanted them. My father could perhaps oversee morning prep, his years of experience still valuable if channeled correctly. My mother, with her decades of interacting with customers, could manage the front of house, provided she was willing to embrace new standards of service. Even Leo could have a place, perhaps managing the griddle for the classic diner fare, if he could accept working for me, under my direction, and adhere to my standards of quality and consistency. There would be changes, I made clear. Big changes. The menu would be revamped, the decor updated, the entire operation streamlined. The local bank manager, Mr. Henderson, a man who had always treated my parents with a sort of weary condescension, arrived later that afternoon, expecting to finalize the foreclosure proceedings. When Chloe, my sharp-as-a-tack business partner, flew in from the city and introduced herself as legal counsel for Sparrow Holdings, the new owner of the property, Mr. Henderson's jaw practically hit his polished shoes. His demeanor shifted instantly from predatory to obsequiously respectful. "Miss Castellanos," he gushed, shaking my hand with an enthusiasm I'd never seen from him. "A pleasure, a true pleasure. Sparrow Holdings is doing such wonderful things for Oak Haven's economy." My parents, witnessing this transformation, exchanged a look of stunned realization. The power of my success, my name, was undeniable. Abuela Elena, when I called her that evening to tell her everything, let out a joyful cry that nearly deafened me. "Lo sabía, I knew it, mi nieta, la reina de la cocina." "I told Ricardo and Maria, I told them you were special, but they wouldn't listen. Now they see, now the whole town will see." Her unadulterated pride was a sweet, validating balm. My cousin Sophia, who'd been a quiet supporter from afar, also proved to be an unexpected ally. She came over to the diner the next day, ostensibly to offer moral support to my parents, but also, I suspected, to gently help them process the magnitude of what had happened. "Tio Ricardo, Tia Maria," I heard her say softly, "Wren is incredible. I tried to tell you how amazing her restaurants are. She's not just a cook, she's a visionary." The immediate aftermath was a period of awkward adjustment. My parents walked around in a daze, their ingrained narratives about me, about themselves, about Leo, shattered. They made clumsy attempts to connect, to offer praise that felt foreign on their tongues. That Saffron Shores restaurant. My father mumbled one morning, looking at me with a newfound hesitant respect. It's always busy. People say the fish is the freshest they've ever had." "Yes, Papa," I said simply. "We have an excellent supplier." I didn't rub it in. There was no need. My success spoke for itself, louder than any words of reproach I could have uttered. I set clear boundaries. "We can discuss the future of Castellanos Corner, and your potential roles within it, when you're ready," I told them. "But things will be different. The old ways weren't working. It's time for a new chapter." Leo was the most visibly adrift. He avoided me for the first few days, sullen and withdrawn. Then, one evening, as I was sketching out new menu ideas at one of the diner tables, he approached, shuffling his feet. "So," he said, not meeting my eye, all that fancy stuff you do, it actually, works, huh? People pay good money for it?" "Yes, Leo," I said, looking up at him. "They do. If it's done well with passion and quality." He nodded slowly, a muscle working in his jaw. Right. It wasn't an apology, not yet, but it was a crack in the wall of his denial, a tiny admission of my reality. The path ahead for him, for all of us, was uncertain, but for the first time, it felt like it might lead somewhere new, somewhere better. In the months that followed, Castellanos Corner underwent a metamorphosis. I didn't try to turn it into a clone of my city restaurants, that would have been a mistake. Instead, I honored its history while breathing new life into it. We renovated, keeping the classic diner feel but updating it with brighter colors, comfortable seating, and a gleaming new open kitchen where I often worked alongside the staff I hired and retrained. The menu became elevated diner classics. The burgers were made with premium, locally sourced beef and served on artisanal buns with homemade condiments. The pancakes were fluffy buttermilk stacks served with real maple syrup and inventive fruit compotes. The meatloaf was my mother's recipe, subtly enhanced with fresher herbs and a richer glaze. I even introduced a version of my slow-braised short ribs as a weekend special, and it became a sensation. The new Castellanos Corner, as the locals started calling it, was a hit. It was a testament to the idea that quality and care could transform even the humblest of establishments. I didn't move back to Oakhaven permanently, but I found myself spending more and more time there, overseeing my growing portfolio of local businesses and, unexpectedly, reconnecting with my roots on my own terms. The gnawing need for my family's approval, which had driven me for so long, had faded, replaced by a quiet, unshakable self-assurance. My success was my own, built on my terms. My parents, slowly, began to change. The shock wore off, replaced by a hesitant, then growing, pride. My mother, after some initial resistance, found she actually enjoyed her new role as front-of-house manager, her natural warmth now channeled into providing genuine hospitality. She even started asking me to show her a few of those fancy techniques in the kitchen, and we found a new, tentative connection over shared recipes. My father, after much persuasion, finally tried my signature seared scallops with lemon butter sauce one evening. He ate in silence, then put down his fork, looked at me with eyes that were clearer than I'd seen them in years, and said, "Wren, this is really, truly good." It was the highest praise he could offer, and it meant more than he knew. Leo's journey was more complicated. The initial humility gave way to a period of resentment, then a sort of lost aimlessness. He wasn't cut out for the pressure and precision of my new kitchen. But he knew the old diner like the back of his hand. Eventually, we found a role for him managing the classic side of the menu, the straightforward burgers, fries, and milkshakes that were still a beloved part of the diner's identity. He worked under a head chef I'd brought in, and slowly, grudgingly, he began to learn, to find a different kind of pride in his work, a pride based on skill rather than unearned entitlement. He never became my biggest fan, but the mockery was gone, replaced by a wary respect. We found a fragile peace. Looking back, the bitterness I once felt has largely dissipated, transformed into a kind of wry understanding. Their dismissal, their inability to see my potential, inadvertently fueled my ambition, forced me to dig deeper, to rely on my own judgment, to find my validation from within, and from those who truly saw me, from Chef Antoine's gruff encouragement, Chloe's unwavering partnership, Abuela Elena's fierce, unconditional love. They were my true family in those crucial, formative years. I learned that passion is its own compass, and it's valid even when, especially when, those closest to you can't read the map. I learned that true success isn't about proving others wrong, but about proving yourself right, about building something authentic and meaningful. And sometimes, the greatest vindication isn't a dramatic confrontation or a shouted, "I told you so," but the quiet, undeniable reality of your own achievements, served up with grace. Family, I discovered, can be redefined. It's not just about blood, it's about who believes in your ingredients, who helps you stir the pot, and who celebrates with you when the dish is finally perfect. So, what do you think? Was it satisfying to see them finally get a taste of reality? I'd love to hear your stories of overcoming family doubts or turning a passion into a profession. Share your experiences in the comments below. It's always so inspiring to read how others have navigated their own challenging recipes for life. And if this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt like your fancy cooking, whatever your unique talent might be, was misunderstood, please hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about turning struggle into strength and rewriting your own family narratives. My final thought for you today is this: never, ever let anyone else define your worth or try to dim your unique spark. Your fancy cooking, your particular brand of magic, is exactly what the world might be hungry for. Trust your palate, trust your passion. Go out there and serve it up. You never know who you might inspire or what empires you might build.